Hello everyone, thank you for joining me once again. Today, we're actually going to do a video on this Lupo. Now, I actually had a DM the other day saying, are you going to do a video on this car? And I wasn't going to, but I was asked to. So we're going to do a video on this car. This is owned by James, lovely lad. He's brought it in for basically the recipe. I've spent my entire youth modifying Lupos and Arosas, seed picks here. And during that time, I sort of figured out the best way to do it safely and properly and, you know, making them, well, look good, basically. So that's what we're doing today. So the people that have been in the comments saying, when you go to a Lupo, please do a video on this one's for you. BMW content will continue soon, but this is what's in the workshop this week. So I'm doing that. So here we go. So, what do we got here? VW Lupo, 1.4, 16 valve, 75 brake. It is basically the same process for about any VW Lupo. They all do the same thing. And today we're lowering it and doing all the extra mods to get it safely lowered. Which means we got to raise the engine. We're going to do a chassis notch. We are going to take the anti-roll bar out. We're going to trim the arches. We're going to dial in the stance. Maybe add a little camber to it. Just get it looking a little prettier. We've already been to the tyre shop this morning to get the wheels retired. Put some new tyres on the wheels so they're a little skinnier. We have these here. So these are 7.5J, I do believe, and these are 165 45 15 Nankang AS1. I thought these tyres went out of stock. I'm pretty sure Nankang was supposedly discontinuing the AS1. And they changed it to NS2 or NS20. No, NS20 they changed it to. And basically the NS1 is so much skinnier than all the rest of the tyres. And the fact that I've got some AS1s is pretty good because it gives us more clearance. The tyre stretch is the most important thing on these cars because they don't have a lot of caster. So when you turn, that arch wants to go right into contact with the tyre. So if you've got a little bit of stretch, you get more lock-to-lock clearance. So the stretch is important. It did have a set of 195 45 15s, which are too big and they will rub. So that's why we've changed the tyres this morning. So yeah, 7.5J is like the minimum width that I would do when we're doing this sort of thing. I used to run 8.5J with the same tyre. Shows barrel stretch. It's a lot of stretch, but I could get a lot of lock-to-lock clearance. The skinnier wheel you put on, the more likely it is going to rub. That's how it is. More stretch equals more clearance when turning. So, if I was going to say the recipe for a Lupo, I would say safe 8J 165 45, pushing the boundaries 8.5J 165 45. But today, we're going with the 7.5J, and that is, we're trying to make it drivable still, but I can get these things literally on the floor. I love it. It's taking me back to my youth. Right, so, before I crack on, I'm just going to show you why we need to take the anti-roll bar off to do this. And this is very important. Here we have inner wheel arch. I've started undoing the strut. Here's the anti-roll bar. So the anti-roll bar goes around the arm and then underneath the subframe all the way back. If you see here, see this little wear indicator here? That little mark there is when the car is lowered and basically the anti-roll bar goes up and it hits the chassis right here. Means it's going to drive awfully because it's going to be sat on the anti-roll bar. If we go any lower than what it was now, I'll put a picture up here. It's going to be on it. It's probably hit it a couple of times now at this height, but taking it out, you literally transform the ride quality because it just basically sits on the anti-roll bar and it won't move. It won't move. It'll be solid and it will just drive awfully. So if you take that out, your car gets lower and it drives better. And with a set of coilovers, you don't really get any roll anyway. So taking it out is absolutely fine. If there is no anti-roll bar there, it is not an MOT failure because there's no anti-roll bar. I'm pretty sure some of the early ones came with no anti-roll bar anyway. So if you take it out, it's not an MOT failure, you're absolutely fine to do that. It's not dangerous. If it was on a standard car, standard springs, and you took the anti-roll bar off, it would probably drive like this. But when you've got coilovers on, it's fine. So first thing to come out is that. Taking the strut out, and we're going to do a chassis notch, which we've seen in a couple of videos before, but I'll show you a before and after when we do this. And yeah, I'm going to crack on. All right, chassis notch. What does a chassis notch do? Well, basically, when you, obviously I've got the axle jacked up at the minute. If you are lowering the car, the drive shaft is going to hit the chassis right here. So we're basically cutting a little semicircle out on there, and that is going to give us clearance around the drive shaft, and then it's not going to rub when we go around corners or on big bumps and stuff. This is absolutely necessary when you're lowering a Lupo. They rub pretty easily. If you're lowering a Lupo and engine raising the car, it's going to rub even more. So you need to do this step if you want the car to look remotely good, because these cars only really look good when they're on the floor. So there you go. I've jacked it up like that. I'm going to mark the chassis route and then just drill a big hole on it and weld it back up. That's pretty simple as it gets. This is a 70mm hole saw. This is my go-to. It's a little bit bigger than the actual drive shaft, but you want to allow for front to back movement, because the bushes and a Lupo, these ones specifically, they like to go all the time. So your wheel will go in and out, and therefore your drive shaft will also go in and out. So a little bit bigger than the actual drive shaft. If you have a TDI Lupo, the drive shafts are much bigger. So you might need to go up a size on the drive shaft hole saw, basically. So little tip for you. Off you go. 3.2mm wall, ever so slightly smaller than my hole saw. I think this is like 68mm and the hole saw is 70. Obviously this is what we're going to be replacing the notch with. We'll cut a half moon shape on this, trim it up to shape and weld it in basically. Now, prime it, seam seal it, jobs are good. Bit of seam seal, let that dry and shrink. So, alley spacers. These are obviously going to lift our engine up, and these are 1 inch thick, so 25mm. And they are 45mm in diameter. So we're going to basically stick these under the engine mount and use our hardened, make sure they're hardened, M8 bolts all the way through there. Bish bash bosh, engine is raised. Yeah, pretty simple stuff. Raise the engine, done. And that is raised. Obviously, we've got to do the other side. That's why it's sitting all like this at the minute. But I have noticed they've sent me the wrong size bolts. I had a look on eBay and I have ordered the right bolts and they've sent the wrong ones. So I have to order more bolts. And I can't get any hardened M8 bolts around my area, so I'm going to have to wait for those. Hopefully I can get them on next day delivery. Really annoying when things like this happen, but I'll leave this propped up for now. I'll do the same under there. These bolts actually work on this side, unlike this one. This one bottoms out to the shoulder just before it's tight. And these ones, they do tighten up all the way. And that is the battery back in. As you see, it does sit ever so slightly on the piss, but you can't see it from here. So let me show you the other benefit of raising the engine. As you can see, subframe, sump much higher, but it also raises the exhaust at the same time. The flexi is usually the lowest point of these cars. If you go up any higher than this, you'll be close to the top of the subframe and the heat shield on top of the cap. So you've got like a finger's gap above there, so it raises the exhaust up so you don't drag that on the floor. Love a little bonus. Right, so coilovers. Obviously you have your top mount, that just sort of sits on top of there. You have a bearing on there, and you have a top cap. Now, this actually has an extra top cap in, just here, which I'm not quite sure why it's in there, but we're gonna get rid of that. That will give us basically roughly 10 mil drop. We're also going to take the helper spring out, which is this spring just here. Now this is separated from the big spring here. You can just see that little divider there. Take this out. When you let the car on the floor, this literally compresses. And what that does is basically just keep this spring in place. So when you jack it up, this spring will be loose. However, you don't need this, and it is loose, but that's absolutely fine. So take that all apart, take that out, leave the adjuster where it is for now. We might adjust it afterwards, but we want to drop the car just a little bit more, but not too much. So helper spring out, take that top mount out, and then see where we stand. That dust boot is not really doing a lot. We'll probably leave that out. That can go just back on there like that, and that will drop the car at least 20, 25 mil, and you won't have to adjust anything. Obviously you have to take it all apart, but yeah. So now I'm going to clean these threads up, get them moving, and then I'm going to trim this bump stop down. So this bump stop is literally there just to basically stop it banging if it bottoms out. Now if you see there, that line there, we're going to trim along that line with the grinder, and then that way we lose like 20 mil of bump stop. If you leave that in there at max height and the car bottoms out, it's going to bottom out a lot sooner and it's going to drive a lot worse. But you only need a little sliver in there to stop it making a noise. So if you trim it down, you get 20 mil extra travel without it bottoming out. Simple as that. And that's a lot of people will leave these in full height, wind the coilovers down, and it will just sit on the bump stop, and you won't have any suspension. You'll just be relying on this little bit of rubber and not the spring. There you are, bump stop removed. Show a little skinny one like that. It's got a bit of plastic there. Get rid of that. That is on there. You put your spring back on. Top cap on. Bearing on. Put that one on. Do it back up. And there you have it. That's your coilover done. Now, we might need to raise this up after this. It might be too low, but you'll have a lot of adjustment. So the spring is loose now. That's what that helper spring does. Once the weight is on the car, that is obviously compressed and is absolutely fine. That's just how these TA Technic adjust. Usually on like a more expensive coilover, they have an adjustable bottom and you wouldn't have to affect the spring height. But I'm pretty sure 99.9% of Lupos and Polos have this style of coilover available. So that's just all you've got to do, basically. Right, so coilover back in. Our new setup needs to be finalized by adding some camber. So, see these bolts here, they're loose at the minute. If you leave them loose and then you push the hub in, out, in, out, in. If you push it all the way in, you get maximum amount of camber. More camber equals more turning radius and you won't hit your arches. So, push it in, do it up, off you go. It's quite a bit of camber there. It looks proper goofy at the minute, but I think it is going to look goofy without the wheels drop. So I'll drop the car down. If I straighten this wheel out here, see? That's straight. If you go over here, yeah, that's not straight. So pushing that hub in has pushed the tracking out astronomically. So obviously this car's going to get tracked afterwards anyway. Tracking your car is one of the most important things ever. I might back off the camber on this, I'm not sure. I'm going to put some weight on it and see what it sits like, because I'm not quite sure where it's going to sit, if it looks weird. It definitely looks weird right now, but when it's on the floor, I think it will look reasonably okay. It looks good until you get to here. That's just way too much camber. You don't need that much camber. If your wheel was a lot wider, you'd be well in, but you know, that's a lot. So I could have basically just pull the camber out, get the wheels like just maybe 1 degree. There's probably like 4 or 5 degrees on it currently. If I just get 1 degree of camber on there, I think that'll be sweet, and it'll just fill the arch out and it'll look a lot nicer. That's better, fills the arch out nicely. There is a little bit of camber on there. Feels nice. You could probably even put a spacer on there. Unless it wanted to go lower, I'm gonna leave it for now. We might lower it further on. I'll ask James once we've got it on the floor and stuff, and I drive it. He still wants to drive it regularly because it's his daily. But sits nice, happy with that. Let's move on to the back. Right, so on the rear, it's pretty similar to the front in terms of lowering. Instead, you have a separate shock and spring. So obviously this is your shock, this is your spring, and that obviously goes up to the body. And we have an adjuster in here. Now, if we go and take these adjusters out, we can literally take the adjusters out, drop the car furthermore, actually 1 bolt underneath there, take that out, undo the shock, drop it down, take the adjusters out, put the spring back in, easy as that. Rear adjuster out, here it is, literally that's gonna drop us another 20, 30 mil. And at that point, you're kind of limited to how low you can go by that spring. Obviously, it's very clear that these coilovers are not really intended to go massively low, and the thing you have to do is you have to get another spring, right? Not one this long. You can get short springs. You want to get a much shorter spring, probably half of this, maybe 1/4 of this. The smallest you can go, I'd probably say half. Now, this is a front spring that I have laying around, and that will fit directly into that cup. However, if you just put the spring in and it's way too low, you will have no adjustment. So you have to then run a smaller spring with the adjuster cup like this. Now this spring is actually too big for this adjuster cup, but you get the gist. You get this spring in there, half the size, you can lower it, and then you can do your fine adjustments with the adjustment. However, for now, we're gonna leave these springs in and see where we stand. When I was younger, none of this information was out there. You just had to figure all this stuff out. Obviously, there's been 120 million Lupos done at this point, but the information is still unclear because it's usually owned by younger generation who are just getting into cars and they're just figuring it all out. And they go on the Lupo pages and they all just speak to each other. And one person put this on 7 years ago, so they just continue on following that trend of just copying that guy. Like back in like 2011, 2012, someone put Corsa Beast shocks on the back of a Lupo, and everyone assumes that shocks lower the car. That is incorrect. Corsa Beast shocks are also way too short for the back of a Lupo. You don't need them. They drive like shit, and you don't need them at all. The reason people would say, oh, the Corsa Beast shocks lowered my car, is because they would be sat on the bump stop, and when they put the shorter shock on, obviously the whole rear axle can then circulate a little bit more, and then you can get more drop. Which is why they assume that the shock lowered their car. But the shock does never lower a car, ever. Unless it's binding up before, it will never lower a car. A shock insert will never lower a car. There's a massive miscommunication throughout the community, and it's so annoying, but if you don't know any better, you don't know any better. But enough of that. These shocks here that come with like TA Technics, they'll be absolutely fine as long as you trim the bump stop. And you only really need to trim the bump stop when you're like nearly tucking rim. That's when you'll sit on the bump stop. That's the only time you need to cut the bump stop. Other than that, just keep these shocks on. And then last but not least, there's one thing you have to cut on your arch. Every single Lupo rubs on it. This one has already rubbed on it. I'm going to show you what you have to do. This Lupo arch has already been rolled. You see this little shiny bit at the end of the arch here? That's exactly where they all rub. All of this won't rub it will rub here and here. The arch shape here is so weird, but it will only rub here and here. So cut this off here, and if you're rubbing down here, your wheels are too wide, and you're never going to be able to overcome that just because of the shape of the Lupo rear arch. But at that point, you're nearly tucking rim anyway, so it doesn't matter. Trim this bit out here, seal it back up, jobs are good. Also, I forgot to mention there is a plastic excess like bracket of the bumper. Now, you've got to be careful of this, don't cut too much off it, but just sort of trim it, or you could just let it naturally wear away with the tyre, which this one has started to do. I would trim it a little bit and then just let the rest rub. It will eventually disappear. It's only a bit of plastic, it's not going to be the end of the world, but it does hold this part of the bumper in, and this screw is all attached to it, and it sort of folds round there. So you want to keep most of it, otherwise your bumper will just be poking out all the time and it'll just look silly. So trim it a little bit, but don't go crazy. And of course, I've trimmed that arch there, so there's plenty of clearance there. This one's actually got arch liners in, which most of these Lupos don't seem to keep, which is crazy to see this on a Lupo now. I feel so old when I speak like this, but back in my day, Lupos used to be, every single one was solid, none of them were rotten. They're absolutely, like, you could pick up a mint one for like 200-300 quid. But now, like, they're actually all going rotten, they're all getting expensive, and it's pretty crazy. It's weird. Like, I know all the older blokes from back in the day would be like, oh yeah, I had like what escorts used to throw around and bag a ration, paid 50 quid for them, etc. This is the new age for me, basically. Old man. Oh, also, before I get off the ramp, this is a very important piece. Now, can you even see that? Let me put a torch on. So, if you look underneath here, the drive shaft, right here, I've just cleaned it. There is a wiring loom just here, right? And that routes around the back of the sump on that edge there, and it basically clips on there. You're going to need to pull that up, move it out of the way, cable tie it up higher, because it will rub on the drive shaft just here. It looks like this one has worn on it ever so slightly. I think there's some wear marks on the plastic itself. Make sure you get up, out of the way, and you won't lose all of your engine electrics because the drive shaft is rubbing on it. That's a very important thing a lot of people miss out on, and yeah, it doesn't always happen, but usually, like this one is, it's hanging off, and you basically don't know about it until you've rubbed through it. Haha, check that out. Looks good, it's got the same fitment all around. Looks pretty tidy. I like it. I like it. Let me get it outside so you can actually see it. There you go. There you go. There's some Lupo content on the channel. Drives good. Drives really nice. Yes, it can be a lot lower, but I want James to get used to it before I advise him to go low. Obviously the car will go much lower. I have raised it up since like 15 mil because the subframe was hitting the floor quite a lot. The subframe is fresh in this right now, and when I say fresh, I mean like there is material on the bottom of the subframe, probably about that deep, and these Lupos, just, you have to drive through that subframe and wear it away, and then you gain like 30-40 mil of clearance, and then you should put a metal plate underneath it. You can then carry on, you have a lot more clearance, and then your lower control arms are actually protected, and then you can carry on. But I want James to get used to this before I say lower it some more, because he wants it usable. It looks good, it can be lower, but like, it hit a lot before I raised it up slightly, so yeah. This needs now is a massive open air in the roof, because that is the best mod that you can do for a Lupo. I'm chuffed. Looks cool. Looks cool. I like doing stuff like this. It takes me back. I sound like such an old man. So yeah, that's a quick video on how to lower a Lupo. I've had thousands and thousands of messages throughout the years on how I've done my Lupos, and that's how you do it. that is the recipe. Yes, there's things that you can improve. You can add little bits here, little bits there that just improve, like mainly just like fitment and turning circle, etc., etc. But that recipe that I've just shown you in the video, if you did that to your car, I could confidently say that you can just drive for thousands of miles on the floor without any real issue. There's little ins and outs that you might pop up, but follow that recipe, you'll be successful. Easy as that. There you go. I will one day return to owning a Seat Rosa in my future. My red one, post a picture here. That car is like the history books. If you search Seat Rosa on Google, that car comes up. So that's why I get so many messages, because they search like Seat or Lupo slammed on Google. It'll come up with me and they'll come straight to me and go, how did you do this? Well, watch this video. That's the link I'm going to send them when they say that. So there you go. In other news, prelude. Off camera, I've been doing a couple of bits and bobs, trying to get this done. The alternator's died, so I've sent that off to be rebuilt. I've been trying to wire up the hydraulics. We're having little bits of problems with it. Trying to make the wheels fit, adding camber, lots of little, tiny little bits that are just really annoying, and then trying to get it ready for its MOT and etc. We need this done because we need the cash release of the car. Why do we need the cash release? Well, it's what I've been banging on about for months now. My E24. My E24 build needs to be done by the end of June. Not even the end of June, like the middle of June. So that's like 2 months away. And I haven't even started it. Now, the amount of work that needs to be done is like, if you said to someone, I want to do all this in 2 months, they'd laugh at you. So it's like a monumentous amount of work that needs to be done. And from experience, you need to prepare a build. If the more you prepare, the better time frame that you'll receive, basically. So I've been doing all the tricks and loops and going through here and buying this certain stuff to make this easier, and the E24 build is happening very soon, and I keep banging on about it, I keep talking about it, but I have put so much money, time and effort into preparing it that if it doesn't go smoothly, I'll probably just cry. But if I do manage to pull it off, which is a monumentous task, I don't even know how I am going to do it, to be honest. I'm going to be broken at the end of it. If I manage to pull it off, it's going to be like my best build to date. Facts. It like 100% will be quality to time frame to like overall outcome. It's going to be chef's kiss. But we'll leave that for another video. I just thought I'd add this video in because I haven't really filmed anything like massive this week. I've been doing little bits and bobs on personal cars, the 36 that we're selling, the Lupo, another car. I've just been doing lots of little bits, so that's what's happening. I just thought I'd update you all. Hope you enjoy the videos. I have another video coming maybe on Monday, so you can enjoy that. You probably won't know what I bought, but I bought something else again. Well, the title of the video will probably be the same as something I've posted before. So take that as you will. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.